What is generational trauma? I talk a lot about that on my channel. So I thought I should do a video on what is generational trauma. So I did a quick Google search, and not only did they call it generational trauma, they call it intergenerational and transgenerational trauma. I've heard that before, but I wanted to look it up and just to see a little bit more. And what that just means is that it's passed down from, transgenerational is passed down. So if you've been wondering what generational trauma is, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Sandy. I am super passionate about recovery and healing from transgenerational, any kind of generational trauma that they want to label it. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of what it is. I went to Psychology Today and just did a quick read through on it, and it was quite interesting. They were talking about how it has to do with the emotional and psychological wounds. What I found interesting was the transgenerational. I never realized that mine was more transgenerational, I guess. And I'll explain that more in a second. I'll give you an example. Basically, what generational trauma, whichever way you want to classify it, comes down to, and I wrote it in my notes as not addressed. It's abuse, neglect, all the different things. It could even be like one of them was talking about war and violence and racism and all those things. It's things that are not addressed that go on and on and on. I love one of their examples that I wanted to talk about. And this one might be more of a definition of generational. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the story. So technically, I was still in my grandma, because how the eggs work, because my mom was in my grandma and I was in my mom. So technically, there's that. If you think of it that way, I was still in my grandma. How that works, that is just mind-boggling to me. So not only physically, that physical, genealogical, actual thing, but there's energy. I think the energy is so important. And I think that's what keeps... They said in the Psychology Today, they said that they don't know how necessarily, specifically, which means they can't necessarily test for it, that generational trauma goes from one generation to the next. I have my thoughts and theories, but one of them is energy. So I wanted to circle back to the transgenerational trauma. That part was the most fascinating to me, maybe because it applies to me the most. But that one, what it comes down to is maladaptive coping skills. That's obviously going to be passed down. I have my video here about conflict resolution and how it was so apparent to me that the generational trauma and the maladaptive coping skills led to that. Well, would have changed that situation completely, and I explained in that video. So basically, trauma cycles happen over and over and over again because something is not getting addressed. Something is not being resolved in a healthy manner. So here's an example. Here's my example. Without getting into too many details, I do know that because I've done the ancestry and the genealogy on it, that it goes back probably almost at least of what I can just research. 5 generations, at least, might be 6. I might be the 6th generation. We're going to say 6. It goes back that far of, we'll say, depression and anxiety and institutionalized type of thing on my dad's side of the family. And so that was fascinating to research completely. That was fascinating. Not helpful that they're all named the same. They just named him. Senior 1, 2, 3. Just saying. They didn't have baby books back then, obviously. So, baby name books. But it was always a secret. It was always a secret. That was another tip that Psychology Today mentioned. And I'll have the link below to the article that I read. They mentioned that a lot of the transgenerational trauma or abuse or whatever you want to call it comes from the fact that it's always been kept a secret. I figured it out because I looked it up. So maybe that was the first beginning of setting myself free, was I had the luxury, I guess in that manner, well, only part of it made the newspaper. That's the other thing. Those are the kind of events I'm talking about, newspaper worthy. the research I've been doing and just learning more about lifespan development and just cognitive development, that when all these traumatic events happened, how old were the kids when it happened? So I know my dad was probably pretty little when something happened to him, but it keeps going unaddressed. And I think that transgenerational trauma is huge now that I actually understand it myself a little bit more. But it comes back to the energy. It comes back to energy and the choice to do something different. It is my mission as much as I can, because obviously I'm human and my kids are bigger. So some damage is probably done. All I can do is be a better role model going forward, because I did the best I could. But every day I choose to do better than I did yesterday. And that was the one thing that they put in there too, is the resilience, building resiliency. So I'm making it a mission. I'm becoming more resilient and encouraging them when I see some of the coping mechanisms that I have used in the past, to teach them better ones as I learn them myself. So that's generational trauma in a nutshell. Sandy style. I do believe that there's still energy, and I'm still working on finding the right words to explain energy in that way, but everything is energy. So you can't tell me that if this heavy anxiety or whatever, the undercurrent is the best way to describe it, the undercurrent that started it in the first place. I'm not great with history, so I might have to go back to see when that first one that I have record for, the history time frame, just to see how that coincided with actual historical events, because that might have something to do with it too. And then it just snowballed, and then more historical events added to and added to. I hope that helps you to understand generational trauma better and what my passion is about it and where it comes from for me. I'm breaking it. I have chosen to do whatever I need to break this generational trauma for myself and my children. I believe that it's part of the purpose I came here for, and to share it with the world so that other people can be set free too. All right, let me know if this resonated with you. Comment below any other things you'd like to know about generational or intergenerational or transgenerational trauma, and I'll make more videos about it. If you want to watch more of my generational trauma videos, click here. If you want to watch more of my inspirational videos, click here.